Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the One Fear Per Year podcast, where we talk about how life is so much better on the other side of our fears. And I am super stoked because Matt Havens is here with us. How are you, Matt? Thank you for joining us.
Janice, very excited to be here. Love that you're doing this. I think it's an important conversation, and so I couldn't be more excited to be with you.
Thank you. I know it's made such a difference in my life that I just can't help but want to spread that good news out to other people. And so for you with fear, do you have a specific example or story of how walking through a fear of yours was absolutely way better, like on the other side of that? Do you have a story or an example of that in your own life?
Honestly, Jan, I got a lot of them. Because I think to your point, the way I've always kind of viewed fear is it's like the only thing in life where it's an uncertainty of an unknown. So when we're fearful of something, we're potentially really scared of something that may never come to fruition, may never happen. And now there is some cases where you might be fearful of a past experience repeating itself, things of that nature. But so I've kind of looked at it that way, like, why am I going to be scared of something that I don't know if it's really actually scary? And so, like, going really, really back, I actually posted something on LinkedIn not too long ago about when I grew up, my dad made me watch a lot of old comedies. He was a comedian. And so, I watched things I definitely shouldn't have been watching at a very young age. Eddie Murphy, Sam Kinison. But one of the movies he made me watch was Defending Your Life with Arthur Brooks. And are you familiar with that movie at all?
Yes.
Okay. So, spoiler alert, if anybody hasn't seen the movie, it's been out for a while, so I feel like it's your fault. But the main character dies in the movie very early and spends the rest of the movie defending his life in this metaphysical courtroom. And the whole situation that's holding him back from, going to the promised land is these situations in his life where he was scared to take action. And they show him over and over and over. And for whatever reason, watching that movie at a young age, I have always viewed situations in life where I am a little scared or fearful as I don't want them to replay this moment later in life. I need to overcome this scared feeling I have and push through it. And so I've honestly approached a lot of situations like that. Sometimes the fear wins. I have walked to the top of an Olympic diving board and not jumped off. But in general, I kind of look at those moments and say, maybe it's going to be amazing. Maybe it's going to be awesome. And in countless situations, it's always been a wonderful journey. So that's kind of how I view it a little bit and how I try to approach it.
You're actually not the first person who has told me, like, "Oh, well, what you're talking about is kind of like that Defending Your Life movie."
Mhm.
So I need to go watch that again because it's been a quick minute since I've seen it. But that is true. Like, I do think about laying on my deathbed going, man, did I do everything that I was put on this planet Earth to do?
Mhm.
Or did I let fear hold me back? And so for anybody who's listening to this who really feels just stuck, like trapped in this prison of fear is what I like to call it, because I know that's how it felt for me. What would you suggest as like a really first good step, like the initial step that they should take?
Well, one, just pause and take a breath, right? I mean, that's maybe like the most basic, but when I've been in situations like that before, yeah, just taking a moment, calming your nerves, taking a deep breath. But depending on, the level at which you're talking about pushing through fear, sometimes I've written out what are the pros and cons. What's the worst thing that can happen in this situation, right? And there's another sort of little mantra that my family's adopted, and I'm proud to say I think my girls, my daughters are 11 years old, that they've sort of adopted as well too. Is you have the rest of your life to be ordinary. You have the rest of your life to, if you tried something and it didn't work, and the fear took over, right? You have the rest of your life to try again, or you have the rest of your life to go back and do the thing that you were doing beforehand. So I think of this a lot for maybe people who are scared to leave a job that they dislike, scared to step out on their own maybe and start a business. If you are scared of that, go try it. And odds are you can probably go back to another job that you don't like 2 years down the road if it doesn't work. You have the rest of your life to kind of push through those fears, sit with them, and figure out what you want to do next. So I think sometimes just writing it down, taking a breath, and looking at it for what is the worst that can happen. I think oftentimes when we really dive into what's the worst, we're going to find out that it's probably not that bad.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of the "there's nothing to fear but fear itself" saying, where, like you were talking about, it's more in our head and kind of the doom and gloom and worst case scenario kind of thing. And yeah, as long as we don't die at the end of whatever the thing is.
And that's important, right? Like, be fearful of doing something. Be fearful of being in the action of something, walking a tightrope across the Grand Canyon, right? Be fearful of doing that, certainly, because you could fall and die. But so often if you talk to friends, I've felt it myself, right? The things we're scared of are so minuscule that when you sit and reflect and really push through those, that's where I kind of think we have to put them on a level of, can you get hurt in doing this? Well, probably not. So maybe it's okay to try. Maybe it's okay to push. And then while you're doing it, if you want to play with your fear a little bit, I'm more comfortable with that than not doing it at all.
Yes. Why do you think we have such a fear of people's judgment or criticism?
Janice, I don't know. And if you can find
Why,
an
Matt?
answer,
Why?
if you can find the answer to that, that would be wonderful. But I'll tell you, it's very true, right? We have this sort of irrational fear of what people are going to think. And when I mentioned that you have the rest of your life to be ordinary, it was a conversation that I've had without getting into too many details. But 3-4 years ago, my wife and I, along with our kids, we sold our house. We traveled in an RV for 16 months because we had this goal of, we wanted to travel the country with our kids before they got too old and didn't want to spend time with us. I'm understanding that's what happens when they become teenagers. And so I would say we wrestled with the fear of, well, people are going to think we're crazy. And some people do, and that's and that's fine. But it was one of the best 16 months that we've had as a family. And when we came up with that, you have the rest of your life to be ordinary, it was an acknowledgement that you can't be scared of what other people are going to think. It's an irrational fear that we have, but when you push through it, to your point, I wouldn't trade those 16 months for anything. And I know my daughters wouldn't. And so I think that's when you can get on the other side of it. But it's really hard to tell people, oh, just don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, I think everybody has to come to their own in that. But once you stop worrying about what other people think, as long as you're not hurting somebody else, then, I think you're going to live a less stressful, happier life.
Totally. And don't you think if you have more of a solid sense of self, like you and your wife coming together going like, "Hey, we want to do this. This is important to us," and having more that yeah, just solid sense that we know this is the right thing for our family,
Mhm.
and then it's a little bit easier to execute. But I know there's this thing where we just kind of want to belong. We want people to, pat us on the back, like, "Yeah, good job." The validation part.
And we all have that, and I certainly don't want to sound holier than thou that I don't have that in aspects too. I also think maybe growing up, like, in a family of comedians and stuff, I've also become extremely comfortable making a fool out of myself to get other people to laugh, and realizing that some people, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea when I do that. They're going to think, who's this weirdo, acting a fool. But the more you do that, the more you realize, I think people are more concerned about themselves than they are you.
Yep.
And I think that helps, like, ground myself a little bit if I'm scared of what somebody else thinks. There's actually a speaker friend of mine, his name's Paul Long. He always says, if you're worried about what other people think about you, don't worry, because they're not.
That's
He
nice.
says it better and differently than that, but I've always loved sort of that phrase of not worried about what other people think.
I love it. So if you I ask everybody this question, and there's no right or wrong answer, but so you have the word fear and everything it entails. If you were to give us a an exact opposite word of fear, what word comes to mind for you? Like the exact opposite?
Uh, Great question, man. The first word that came to my mind was courage. Because I think if fear is sort of a limiting belief or something that's holding you back, I think courage is the willingness to not be held back.
Yeah, and that's what I love that you said that, because for me, it's all about kind of, it's I call it the courage muscle,
Mhm.
and it's something that we kind of have to work out by taking action, by walking through our fears, and it's kind of a continual thing. It's just not like I do one thing. That's why the whole one fear per year, right? So we can keep not overwhelm ourselves with too many things, but at least be intentional about doing one solidly scary thing every year. And so for you, if you were to think of a year from today, what is one fear in this next year that you want to walk through?
Man, I should have prepared for that question considering the name of the podcast. But I hadn't really thought about this year. What do I want to do? So I'll say last year. Last year for me, it was doing an Ironman triathlon. That was something I wouldn't say I was fearful of doing it. I was fearful of the amount of time it was going to take me to train for it and whether or not I could make that work. I was happy to say I completed it in November, and to your point, like walking through it was one of the greatest accomplishments that I've done. And so this year, I was going to kind of take the year off and not do something like that, but I will have to think about what it could be. The most like silly, ridiculous fear that I have is like a fear of heights, but not like I've been skydiving 5 times. That doesn't scare me. It's like tall buildings with an edge.
Yes.
So, going to, like, the Empire State Building and standing up on the patio, like, you can't get me away from the wall. So, maybe I need to, like, do some sort of rappelling down a large building of some sort, and see if I could overcome that. So, if anybody's listening to this has, like, a hookup for that, let me know.
Spider-Man rappelling down.
Yeah, something like that. That would probably, or those, you've seen those videos where people climb, like, wireless towers and stuff like that. That would be absolutely the thing that I am most scared of that I should try.
Well, you're not alone. That's actually one of mine, and I haven't gone skydiving yet, but yeah, there's something about the edge where I have this thought that I'm just gonna throw myself off. It's a very weird, like
Oh, it's no, yeah, I can tell you my first skydiving story and, like, the fear related with it was, I went skydiving for my 18th birthday as sort of this bucket list thing I wanted to do, but it wasn't a tandem, it was I forget what they call it, where as you are jumping from the plane pulls the parachute, um kind of for you. And so you don't have a massive free fall. You have about 4 seconds of a free fall before the parachute is deployed. But uh, you actually have to crawl out onto the strut of the plane while it's in the air and moving. And so, of course, that's very odd and scary. But then you're hanging from the strut, and they tell you once you get out there, it's not safe for you to come back. You have to go. And if you don't let go, we will make you let go by shaking the wing. And so I got out there and sure enough, I'm hanging on and I'm not letting go when they say go. And the guy kind of looked at me, I could barely hear him. He goes, "You got about 2 seconds before we shake it." And I was like, and let go. And it was great. And like was so happy I did it and did it multiple times after that. But so the advice to you is one, don't do that. Go tandem because you'll have a person on your back that will force you out of the plane. It'll be a lot easier.
that. Yes, I will do, and I do want to do that at some point in my life because the fear of heights is real for sure. And I don't know if something like that, if we ever actually overcome, like what if every time we do it, we're just as scared? It's just more we make that choice that I'm gonna do this, fear and all.
I think that's the choice that we should all strive to make. Yeah, I mean, the number one fear people say they have is public speaking. And you and I both know, like, that is not to say that after hundreds, if not thousands of events, I am not still a little bit fearful the second before I go step on stage. and it's still there, but you become more comfortable with it.
Mm.
You come to realize that, again, I go back to what I said earlier, like, what's the worst that can happen from doing this? And so, yeah, I don't think fear just like completely removes itself. It's okay to be there, and sometimes that's actually a little bit of healthy fear. But the more you get comfortable pushing through it and taking action on it, it becomes easier.
Yes, absolutely. All right, we are pretty much out of time, but is there one last thing, just if you could give advice or encouragement to someone who really does, because for me, I know fear can be debilitating. What kind of advice would you give to someone who just is in that spot of debilitating fear?
I think, well, in part, I think some of the advice comes from, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Daniel Pink that talked about the regrets. As I go back and I think about defending your life and the role that played, when we get to our end of time here, right? Most people, most older people, and if you know older people in your life and you get a chance to talk to them, when you ask them about fear, I think more often than not, people are scared. They have regrets, or they're scared of the things that they did not do over the course of their life. And so when fear can be debilitating, I think we also have to ask ourselves, is this something that we are going to look back on later in life and wish we did? In some cases, the answer might be no, it's not that important. And so that's fine, don't do it. But depending on the level of importance to you, then I think with that sort of reflection, it can just give you a little bit more energy to push forward. And so I think it's okay to be scared doing something while you're doing it, but I don't want to be the person that's scared to where they don't even try. And so the only advice I can say is take one step. If it's you're scared of doing a race, sign up. If you get to the race and you don't do it, whatever, you took a step by signing up. Whatever those things may be, like, find the little step that you can take that pushes you in that direction. And as you start going, then I think more often than not, you'll get more comfortable along the way.
Thank you, Matt. You've been an amazing guest. I appreciate all your insights, and let's go one fear per year, baby.
Let's do it.